Imagine standing at the peak of the Hollywood mountain, with every studio executive having your number on speed dial. That was the reality for Brendan Fraser in the late 90s. He was the golden boy, the ultimate leading man who seemed to have it all. But then, almost overnight, the posters disappeared, the trailers stopped playing, and one of the biggest stars on the planet simply vanished. It's one of the most baffling mysteries in Hollywood history. How does someone go from being the king of the box office to a complete ghost? You won't believe the twists and turns this story takes, because while we all saw the movies, none of us saw the heartbreak happening behind the scenes. Let's take a trip down memory lane to the era of peak Fraser mania. If you were around, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Brendan wasn't just an actor, he was a force of nature. In George of the Jungle, he was the perfect specimen of health and humor, swinging into our hearts with that signature goofy grin. And then came The Mummy. Rick O'Connell was the hero we all wanted to be, brave, funny, and incredibly charming. He was the perfect mix of an action star who didn't take himself too seriously. He was physically unstoppable, doing his own stunts and carrying massive franchises on his back. He was everywhere. You couldn't walk into a movie theater without seeing his face. He had that rare it factor that made him bankable, reliable, and seemingly destined for a career that would last forever. But then the silence started. It wasn't a loud explosion, it was just an eerie transition. One day he was the face of every blockbuster, and the next, he was nowhere to be found. The industry can be cold, but this felt different. It was like Hollywood had collectively decided to erase him. No more sequels, no more leading roles, just a sudden absence that left fans scratching their heads. Where did he go? Was he hiding? Did he lose his passion for the craft? Rumors started swirling, but nobody had the full picture. He became a ghost in an industry that usually thrives on noise and gossip. Fast forward to 2016, and the internet finally realized something was seriously wrong. Do you remember that viral Sad Brendan meme? It came from a specific interview where we saw a man who looked completely depleted. Instead of the vibrant hero, he was soft-spoken, his eyes heavy with grief. He seemed like he was carrying the weight of the entire world on his shoulders. The internet rallied around him. Everyone was asking the same thing. He said, "What happened to our Brendan?" It sparked a massive wave of concern that felt personal to those who grew up watching him. This brings us to the big question: why did Hollywood turn its back on him? Was it a choice he made to step away, or was he pushed out? The industry is cutthroat, and if you don't play the game, you might find yourself on the sidelines. But with Brendan, it felt like there was a deeper, more sinister reason for his disappearance. Was he a victim of the very system he helped build? Nowadays, we hear about the Brenaissance, that incredible comeback story that has everyone cheering. We see him winning Oscars and getting standing ovations, but the road to that redemption was paved with tragedy. Before the glory, there was a decade of darkness that would have broken almost anyone. For years, people whispered about his health or his personal life, thinking he just couldn't keep up anymore. But the truth was far more scandalous than anyone imagined. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Did he lose his touch or his protection in an industry that eats its stars alive? It makes you wonder if the spotlight he craved became the thing that burned him. Are you ready to dive into the dark side of the spotlight? What we're about to uncover explains exactly why one of our favorites had to disappear just to survive. But the silence wasn't just about a lack of scripts. It was about a body that was literally breaking down under the pressure of being a human cartoon. You see, Brendan wasn't the kind of actor who let a stunt double have all the fun. He wanted to be the guy swinging from the vines and taking the punches. But by the time the third Mummy movie rolled around, he was essentially a walking medical miracle. We're talking about a decade of constant surgeries. He had a laminectomy, which is a serious spine procedure, followed by more work on his back. Then came the partial knee replacements and even repairs to his vocal cords. He famously described himself as being held together with tape and ice packs just to get through a scene. While his body was failing him, something even more devastating happened behind closed doors. In 2003, at a luncheon for the Golden Globes, an incident occurred that would haunt him for decades. Brendan alleged that he was sexually assaulted by Philip Burke, the then president of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. At the time, the world wasn't ready to hear a story like that from a male action star. Brendan felt his heart wither. He tried to tell the HFPA what happened, but instead of support, he felt a chilling coldness. This is where the blacklist theory comes into play. It wasn't just a conspiracy, it was a pattern. Suddenly, the invitations to the big ceremonies stopped. The A-list casting calls dried up. Brendan started to wonder if he was being punished for speaking his truth. Imagine being at the height of your career and feeling like you've been erased because you stood up for yourself, and the hits just kept coming. On top of the physical pain and the industry betrayal, his personal life was becoming a storm of its own. His divorce from Afton Smith became public fodder, especially when the details of the alimony payments came out. Reports suggested he was on the hook for nearly $900,000 a year. When your career is in a free fall and you're facing that kind of financial drain, it's a recipe for total despair. He was losing his fortune, his health, and his place in the world he loved. But perhaps the most heartbreaking blow came in 2016. Just days before that famous sad Brendan interview we all remember, he lost his mother. He was grieving, physically broken, and spiritually exhausted, yet he still showed up to do his job. Is it any wonder he looked like a shell of his former self? While Brendan was dealing with this mountain of personal tragedy, Hollywood itself was changing. The era of the personality-driven movie star, the guys like Tom Cruise or Will Smith who could carry a movie on their name alone, was being replaced by the franchise era. Suddenly, studios didn't care about the man, they cared about the mask. Everything became about CGI-heavy superhero roles and intellectual property. The industry moved toward a style of filmmaking that didn't really have a place for the raw, vulnerable, physical charisma that Brendan brought to the table. He was a man out of time, a relic of a golden age that was being bulldozed by the Marvel machine. He was suffering in silence, and for a long time, it seemed like he was destined to be a trivia question, but the universe has a funny way of working things out. While he was tucked away, dealing with his demons and his doctors, the world was starting to miss him. The stage was being set for a comeback so legendary it would make the internet explode. It all started with a single magazine interview, one candid conversation that would change the course of history. But how did a man who felt so discarded find the courage to let the world back in? You won't believe what happened when a journalist finally asked the right questions, sparking a fire that no one saw coming. That spark I mentioned, it came from an unlikely place, a raw, vulnerable profile in GQ magazine in 2018. The headline simply asked the question everyone had been whispering for a decade: whatever happened to Brendan Fraser? For the first time in years, Brendan didn't give a polished, PR-friendly answer. He laid it all out there. He spoke about the physical agony of his surgeries, the crushing weight of his divorce, and finally, he spoke the name that had haunted him since 2003, Philip Burke. The world stopped. This wasn't just a "where are they now" fluff piece. It was a roar for justice that shattered the silence. The internet didn't just read the article. They weaponized it with pure, unadulterated love. Almost overnight, the Brennaissance was born. It started on Reddit, migrated to TikTok, and took over Twitter like a wildfire. Gen Z and millennials, who grew up with him as their hero, united to protect this man at all costs. Have you ever seen a fandom so wholesome? It wasn't about toxic debates or fan wars. It was about restorative justice for a guy who deserved better from a system that chewed him up. Everyone was rooting for him, and the industry finally had to take notice. Before the big screen called again, Brendan found a home in high-quality television, joining the cast of Doom Patrol, as Cliff Steele was a stroke of absolute genius. Even though he spent most of his time behind a robot mask or providing the voice, he brought an incredible amount of soul to the character. He proved to the skeptics that his acting chops hadn't faded one bit. If anything, they had matured like a fine wine. It was the perfect bridge back to the spotlight, showing the world that he could handle complex, weird, and deeply emotional roles with ease. Then came the moment that changed everything. Darren Aronofsky, a director famous for seeing the hidden depths in actors, cast Brendan as Charlie in The Whale. This wasn't just a role, it was a transformation. Playing a 600-pound man struggling with isolation and the desperate need for redemption required an emotional intensity that most actors would shy away from. Brendan didn't just act, he bared his entire spirit. The physical transformation involved heavy prosthetics, but it was the look in his eyes, the raw vulnerability and kindness that truly captivated audiences. The reaction was nothing short of legendary. Do you remember the videos from the Venice Film Festival? When the lights came up after the premiere, the audience stood for a staggering 6-minute standing ovation. Brendan stood there, tears streaming down his face, looking genuinely overwhelmed, as if he couldn't believe the world still wanted him. It happened again at TIFF and again in London. It was like a collective global hug for a man who had been out in the cold for far too long. Honestly, if those videos didn't make you tear up, you might want to check your pulse. It all culminated in the ultimate redemption, the 2023 Academy Awards. When his name was called for Best Actor, it felt like a victory for every person who has ever been counted out or told they were finished. His speech was a masterclass in humility and grace. He thanked Darren Aronofsky for throwing him a creative lifeline and used his platform to encourage others who were struggling. He looked like a man who had finally come home. Today, Brendan Fraser is more than just a movie star. He's basically the world's dad. He's become a symbol of resilience and kindness in a town that often lacks both. Fans obsess over his wholesome interviews and his genuine gratitude for his second chance. And the future? It's looking brighter than ever. Rumors are swirling about a return to major franchises, and he's already working with legends like Martin Scorsese. Brendan's story teaches us that while Hollywood can be disposable, true talent and character are permanent. It's the ultimate lesson in the power of a second chance. Can anyone else pull off a comeback this legendary? Probably not, but we're just glad he's back where he belongs. In the spotlight, shining brighter than he ever did the first time around. Welcome back, Brendan. We missed you.